Nearly every day, there is a report of a healthy young person dying suddenly without explanation. Welcome to Freedom Alive. Dr. Peter McCullough helped lead hundreds of doctors who saved the lives of countless people with his global research and protocols. And when government health agencies and big pharma failed to do their job and lied to the public, he has called them out. I'm honored to again be joined by co-host Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, Dr. McCullough has always warned us about the COVID shots. But instead of giving him a Nobel Prize, corrupt organizations have tried to destroy him, along with many other doctors just like him. And now as a result, we're tragically seeing so many people dying suddenly.
Yes, he's board certified in internal medicine and cardiology. In his field, he has published more in history in the world than anybody. And he has been on the forefront leading with regards to COVID. He produced the very first, or one of the very first, COVID treatment peer-reviewed protocol documents in early of the pandemic situation, 2020 or early 2021. It had been very helpful for so many people, and it set the groundwork. And he has saved so many people's lives by this treatment protocol using nutraceuticals and other kinds of sequenced medications. Mm-hmm. He's been a leader worldwide, and yet his voice has been targeted for silencing because it doesn't fit the big pharma narrative or the federal regulatory agencies, the CDC and the FDA. He has an incredible message, and I'm looking forward to his interview.
Me too. For those of you at home, we have so much information, and we're so blessed to be able to bring Dr. Peter McCullough into your home today. You're going to love this time in this interview, but our Freedom Alert is next.
A director is caught saying Pfizer is mutating COVID viruses. I'm Matt Staver, co-host of Freedom Alive. An undercover journalist at Project Veritas caught a Pfizer director flippantly discussing internal plans to mutate the COVID viruses. Dr. Jordan Walker said the drug company is doing directed evolution research using live monkeys, and he bragged that COVID will probably be a cash cow for us for a while. Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of mRNA platforms, said you are gaining function. You're creating a new function in one virus by adding elements from virus 2, infecting one monkey and then another monkey. That's called serial passage. That appears to have been one of the technologies deployed in the Wuhan Institute of Virology with humanized mice strains that I believe were obtained from the EcoHealth Alliance. That's an example, he said, of directed evolution.
Up next, Matt's interview with Dr. Peter McCullough.
I'm very pleased to welcome our special guest, Dr. Peter McCullough, expert in internal medicine, cardiology, COVID, and other epidemiology issues related to COVID. Dr. McCullough, we're all seeing this phenomenon that we've never witnessed before, and it's this died suddenly phenomenon. Can you address this?
Our U.S. FDA warns that the COVID vaccines can cause myocarditis, blood clots, neurologic damage, and the peer-reviewed published literature shows that these cases can be and are fatal. So it's all out there for people to be forewarned. We saw reports in Europe and recently reviewed a public blog in a stable period before COVID-19 vaccination among European athletes, age under 35, active, semi-pro and pro, 29 cardiac arrests per year. Since COVID-19 vaccination, that rate has jumped to 283 cardiac arrests per year, 2021, 2022, annualized. We're talking a tenfold increase. Epoch Times is reporting 270 athletes have had cardiac arrests, and we've seen prominent figures like Damar Hamlin, Buffalo Bills, cardiac arrest on Monday Night Football. A swimmer, Ty Wells, died cardiac arrest. And I can tell you as a cardiologist, the vaccines cause heart damage called myocarditis. And our guidelines say we cannot let them play because the surge of adrenaline can precipitate cardiac arrest. So my great fear here is that indeed it's the COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis. These athletes are screened out for serious heart disease before they ever get on the field. The vaccine, I think, is a smoking gun.
I was doing some research on that same study. About 2.5 athletes per month worldwide averaged died under 35 before COVID. And now when you look at 2021, January was about 2. So it was on that same average. But then in February, as these shots began to roll out, it just continued to escalate all the way through the end of that year. So you have a clear distinction. With regards to these shots, why are these shots different, for example, with regards to myocarditis, pericarditis, other heart conditions, than COVID itself?
Well, COVID itself, there was a concern that it could cause heart damage, and the NCAA, Big Ten, as well as U.S. military had well-conducted screening studies done. The Big Ten screened thousands of athletes during COVID-19 in 2020 before the vaccines for myocarditis with blood tests and cardiac imaging. They found a handful of purported cases, but none of them were serious, no hospitalizations and deaths, so they shut down the screening program. Same thing with the military. Now what happened, the vaccines clearly cause heart damage because the vaccines go to the heart as a mainline delivery of genetic code for the spike protein. A recent paper from Harvard by Yonkers and colleagues in Circulation has shown that circulating free spike protein is damaging the heart. It's not covered by the antibodies produced from the vaccination. And then we have a paper by Bohmeyer and colleagues from Germany that's physically found the spike protein in the heart in those suffering from myocarditis at biopsy.
So when you have COVID, you have development of spike proteins. And then when you get the COVID shots, that also produces these spike proteins. What's the difference between the two?
The difference is that the body is fighting off the virus in the nasopharynx, and there may be little or no systemic entry, particularly with early multi-drug treatment. That's the reason why treatment's so important early. But with the vaccine bypasses all that. It's a shot in the deltoid muscle. Some believe, and there are estimates that about 2.5% of cases, it actually may go mainline right into the bloodstream through a venular capillary. And there, the lipid nanoparticles target the heart. They also target the brain, the adrenal glands, the reproductive organs, and they install the genetic code for the spike protein, which then is produced in an uncontrolled manner for an uncontrolled period of time. Now, 2 studies show the spike protein is circulatory in the bloodstream for 30 days. And we have no such belief that that occurs with the viral illness. It's long gone. So the COVID-19 vaccine is far more dangerous than having COVID itself.
So the spike protein from the shots are going to permeate your body in a much greater effect than COVID itself. It's going to be more isolated. Does it also have more of an inflammatory process, the shots?
It does, because the messenger RNA and adenoviral DNA actually install the genetic code in human cells to produce spike protein for an uncontrolled period of time. The spike protein is expressed on the cell surface, and then the body attacks its own cells. Very different than a human body fighting off a viral infection.
With regards to children, you've talked about, and there's some research out about all the different safety signals for children ages 5 through 11. Can you address that as well?
The safety signals are extraordinary. There's been 2 vignettes reported in VAERS recently, disturbing. One is a 6-month-old baby, and in a single setting had received the MMR, the Tdap, pneumococcal vaccine, influenza vaccine, and COVID vaccine. That child was dead a few days later. Another one, a multiply vaccinated 2-year-old child, again, died a few days later. These are literally cases of vaccinated to death. The children have no theoretical benefit from vaccination, and there shouldn't be a single child harmed from these emergency use authorized vaccines.
Now, we're seeing some reports out about Southwest pilots, other pilots, and obviously Bob Snow is a pilot that was recently on Tucker Carlson. We've interviewed him on this program. You're familiar with him, an airline pilot who had a cardiac event right after landing in Dallas. What are you seeing and what are you seeing and hearing about with regards to what's happening with our airline pilots who have been vaccinated with these COVID shots? First,
Pilot Snow, we've learned through investigative work that this event was never investigated by the FAA. And the FAA has clear regulations. When something happens to a pilot, it must be investigated, just like any crash or near miss would be investigated. So that's the first point of wrongdoing. And that the senior physician for the FAA, she never contacted him to review his case or what happened. So we're greatly disturbed that the FAA is willfully blind to these safety events. And now there's been a change in the manual for medical problems for pilots that have to be checked on for them to be medically cleared. And there's been a loosening of the cardiovascular criteria, multiple ECG abnormalities. And what I've said is that, listen, they can change criteria for acceptance, but it should be based on data. And EKG changes are either due to progressive age, use of cardiovascular drugs, or cardiovascular disease. And the public deserves to know, why did the FAA loosen these regulations? Which one of the three was it? And is it safe?
Can you spend a moment on there to describe what we're talking about when the FAA changing the criteria for these heart exams? How does that affect pilots? What's the result of the change? And what's the technical change that they actually did?
The technical change is a whole array of EKG changes, allowing more abnormalities from normal. And that means pilots, it'll be easier for them to become medically certified. And I can tell you, as a cardiologist, I look at these EKGs and stress tests and other exams. And, we want our pilots to be fit with no risks of having abnormal arrhythmias or problems in the cockpit. And I'm concerned that without an explanation, the FAA may be engendering the safety of passengers and the pilots themselves by allowing them to be in the cockpit, now with loosened medical criteria.
So what used to be abnormal, that would be a disqualifier for a pilot when they got an abnormal EKG and would be disqualified from flying. Now, under these new revised guidelines, that otherwise disqualified pilot is now qualified, passes the EKG test?
Oh, it's not exactly like that. If they had an abnormal ECG, then other investigations would be warranted. But now that abnormal ECG wouldn't trigger any questioning, and they would, again, be approved to fly.
So there would be no other questions after that. Otherwise, it would have triggered some other testing to determine if there was some other additional problems that would disqualify this pilot. Now it's not even going to trigger these additional tests.
That's correct.
I know you fly a lot. That makes you, how does that make you feel as a passenger in the airline when you don't know what's going on in these cockpits with so many pilots having adverse reactions to this as well?
It's true. There was a harrowing case of a plane that took off from Chicago O'Hare Airport, and the co-pilot, age 36, has a cardiac arrest in the cockpit. You can imagine the commotion with the pilot. This is during takeoff. He's trying to manage this, get the stewardesses and flight attendants, others involved, get him out of the cockpit, start resuscitation. They quickly turned the plane around and headed back to O'Hare. But sadly, this 36-year-old man died. And this is an example of just a near miss. It was one death. It could have been all the people on the plane.
What about some of the other physical symptoms that people are having from these COVID shots? Can you go through some of those descriptions?
The big ticket items are heart damage, myocarditis, myopericarditis, these arrhythmias, atrial fibrillation now becoming common in younger people, neurologic damage, both hemorrhagic and ischemic strokes. Acute psychosis now has been reported in 10 papers, where people really start to have disturbed thinking patterns, have to be psychiatrically hospitalized, all attributable to the vaccine. We're seeing an array of blood clot presentations, both arterial and venous blood clots requiring amputations, prolonged blood thinners. The blood clots are very large. Recently, Wu and colleagues from the FDA reported on thousands of blood clots after vaccination. Some of these are gigantic blood clots going from ankle to hip. 11% were fatal by the FDA's own publication. And then finally, an array of bothersome skin disorders, which don't go away, allergic rashes, some of them disfiguring, requiring advanced therapy, dermatology visits. About 15% of people have some new medical problem, according to a survey by Zogby, after COVID-19 vaccination.
And recently, the CDC had a panel discussion, and it was aired via the internet. And one of the individuals with the CDC finally admitted that they are seeing debilitating conditions following the COVID shots. Why are they just now coming out with this information when they knew about this early on?
You know, I think about 2 years ago, I told Laura Ingraham on Ingraham Angle, Fox News, that the CDC was running 9, 12, 15, 18 months behind on the data. And it's clear they're running far behind on the data. As an example, the CDC and FDA recently acknowledged a stroke signal. A stroke signal. I can tell you last year in JAMA from 3 Nordic countries, Van Dag Berhild reported 7,750 neurologically devastating strokes within 28 days of taking the vaccine. So our agencies are woefully behind on the data, and the public's at risk.
Well, they may be behind, and they certainly are, but is there also an intentionality for them to just be too cozy with big pharma? And they have information. For example, the FDA wanted to have 75 years to be able to produce the information that it reviewed in a few months with regards to the Pfizer application.
It's true. You know, reporters were chasing Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla, the veterinarian, through the streets of Davos. Later on, he gave a statement that Pfizer knew of no safety signals with the vaccine. But in that dossier you mentioned, there were 1,223 deaths within 90 days of release of Pfizer. That was reported to Pfizer by their family members. And you're right, the FDA is actively involved in the cover-up.
Now, you saw the video of Project Veritas with the individual who talks about, well, they're not doing gain of function, but they're doing directed evolution. And then on a Friday night, Pfizer at 8 o'clock Eastern time did a media dump to say, well, they're not involved in gain of function or directed evolution, but they are doing something with regards to engineering a virus when there is no gain of function mutation. What do you make of that video, and what do you make of Pfizer's statement?
Dr. Jordan Tristan Lee Walker, he's stung in a sting operation where he reveals in meetings at Pfizer that, in fact, Pfizer is considering or doing what's called directed evolutionary research. They're intentionally modifying SARS-CoV-2 in order to anticipate a vaccine to it. And I can tell you, if this virus ever got out of Pfizer labs, that would qualify as domestic terrorism. So this is way beyond gain of function. This may be being done overseas. I think Pfizer should be immediately investigated. They should turn over all the genetic codes that they have. And Walker, I think if he's wise, he'll turn state's witness. He could end up being a hero in this.
Yes, I definitely think they need to be investigated, they need to be held accountable. He also talks about this revolving door that's good for the pharmaceutical company, but not good for Americans, and that is this revolving door from the regulatory agencies. He didn't name them, but they would obviously be the CDC, the FDA, NIH, between those workers and their future employment with the big pharma. So when they come to approve a drug, they're not going to be critical of a company because they may want to go work for that company later.
A point in case is former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb. As an FDA commissioner, he couldn't have been biased because he was going to get his lucrative job on the board of Pfizer, where he is advising the investment community on CNBC every morning to take Pfizer vaccines. And it turns out he was trying to influence Twitter in order to suppress valuable information on natural immunity. So Scott Gottlieb, former FDA commissioner, junior physician who had a bright future ahead of him, now is publicly disgraced and has got nowhere to hide.
One of the things I found interesting in that Pfizer press release that was done at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, it wasn't an emergency because the video got released a few days earlier, so they did it intentionally, is that they never distanced the company from Dr. Walker, and they never denounced Dr. Walker, which itself is startling. If you're in crisis management mode, which they should have been, you would think that they would distance the company from Walker, but they did not. So that itself is quite telling.
It's true. They look like they intend to keep Walker in the fold. They're probably quite concerned about him turning and basically becoming now a protected witness.
I thought the exact same thing. That's probably why they didn't distance the company, because of the damage that he could otherwise do. So someone who has had the shots, and they may or may not have any side effects at this point, what's the kind of treatment to try to cleanse their body, if you will, from the residual of those shots that they've taken?
I think there's two important points. One, again, it tends to be cumulative. So if no more shots are taken, the first point is don't take any more shots. You may have gotten out of this just fine. The second point is be vigilant. Some of these abnormalities can be actually handled if the patient perceives something's going wrong. For instance, myocarditis or pericarditis. In terms of detoxification, no proven strategies at this point in time. I think the most promising substance is a natural Japanese substance called nattokinase, which is a natural proteolytic enzyme that has been shown in a preclinical study to actually dissolve the spike protein, and it's available in a variety of nutraceutical supplements. We've tried conventional drugs. I know I've tried them all. I don't think anything right now has an effect. So I think nattokinase is in the lead. It clearly needs human clinical studies.
And that would be in certain nutraceuticals that you could purchase over the counter?
At the wellness company, they can get both. So if they go to twc.health.com, they can not only have access to the nutraceuticals and supplements, but doctors through their physician service there, Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, Frontline Critical Care Network, all of them available. Hopefully more of patients' primary doctors will start to get on board and recognize the vaccines cause great harm, and we have to stop them and start causing some actions here to get people, back on the path to health.
Well, I know there's so many people that are now distrusting of their own doctor because of the bad advice that they got. But fortunately, there are some doctors, many doctors, that are starting to see the light and change. So it's very critical for people to be able to know where they can reach doctors that have been scientific, been intentional in pursuing the truth. And they can do that through your website?
That's right. They can go to twc.health.com. That's a wonderful source. And I agree with you. Recently I gave a stage presentation at Clay Clark's Reawaken America. And I told a large audience, I've given more public statements and analyses on the pandemic than all of our public health officials combined for the course of 3 years. And you won't find a Dr. McCullough highlight reel of me flipping and flopping and flipping and flopping. I've been consistent. I've been accurate. And I've tried to help as many patients as I can through my clinical care, but my scholarship and responsibility in the media.
Well, you also have a book called The Courage to Face COVID-19. Can you also get that book at the same website or go to Amazon to get it as well, or wherever?
Right. The two principal places are Amazon, but also through the book website, couragetofacecovid.com. But we have the audio from the actual events, my Senate testimony, my speech on the Lincoln Memorial, and so many more.
And that's couragetofacecovid.com?
That's right.
And finally, for those that want to subscribe to your Substack, how do they do that?
Go to Substack, Courageous Discourse. Again, I write it with myself and John Leake, and we cover a range of pandemic issues as well as those affecting civil liberties. And it's very popular. And I provide graphical abstracts. All the papers I mentioned today are on Substack. You can look at them yourself. Every time I go on the media, this show and national TV, I cite the literature. That is something you don't see from our public health officials, and you don't see it from the liberal, false narrative doctors either.
Well, Dr. Peter McCullough, thank you for your courage. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for being a voice of truth.
Thank you.
Matt, that was a remarkable interview with Dr. McCullough. Let's talk for a minute about this term, died suddenly. It's taken on new meaning in the last several years. The breadth of it is startling. It's not just young athletes on the field. It's so many.
Well, if you look
areas.
at obituaries, for example, in your local area, and you scroll down in the hard print or online, you're going to see died suddenly or died unexpectedly. If you go online and you do died suddenly or died unexpectedly, you can do that in Facebook, you can do that in some other search engine. You're going to find all these people that just unexpectedly died. Now, there are times when people die unexpectedly, but not at the level that we're seeing now, and especially not healthy people, for example, in the athlete realm. And that's happening globally. As Dr. McCullough said, there's study with regards to the average number of global athlete deaths in the world prior to 2021, and it was about 2.5 deaths per month. By the end of 2021, that was in the 50s to 60 number and higher. So you're talking about large numbers, huge percents of increase of athletes that are in the prime, in their 20s, even younger, that are some of them on the field, but they're in the peak of their athletic fitness, and they just die suddenly. Why? Well, because of these shots that are causing the inflammatory process in the heart, causing myocarditis, pericarditis, other kinds of inflammatory cardiac events.
There's a aspect of this that's in plain sight, right? But so many people can't see.
Well, they can't see because they don't want to see.
Yeah.
There are some people that have vested interest. Obviously, there are pharmaceutical companies. They have a big interest in controlling the narrative with regards to the medicine practice of medicine and hospital. So they influence a lot, and don't underestimate their global ability, and others as well. There are some that just don't want to see it. But there's a number of people, like, for example, a cardiologist that I came in contact with. He was doing a blog early on, and he said, what do we know about the COVID shots? And point one is they're safe. He now has changed his opinion. Why? Because as a cardiologist, in his practice, he sees all this increase of heart conditions right after someone received the COVID shot. And he also sees that happening among his colleagues. So he is now completely opposed to the COVID shots because of the empirical evidence. Thankfully, he has been enough with integrity to admit that he was wrong before, but some people don't want to admit, and some doctors don't want to admit. Why? Because they recommended these shots. People got injured, or they had disabilities, or some died, and now if they admit they were wrong, they're afraid of malpractice.
Exactly, exactly. For those of you at home, we are so delighted and honored to be able to bring this information, this truth, to you, really. We're excited that we're going to be able to bring Dr. McCullough back for another episode that will focus more on the censorship that so many are facing, including him. We just want to continue to bring you this information so that you can make the best possible decisions to protect your family. Well, in closing, remember Galatians 5, verse 1, which says, "It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. So join us here next time, where you'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again on Freedom Alive.